We're often told that getting really, truly smart means you have to spend decades in a classroom. But what if there's a more direct way, a practical path? Today, we're going to break down a super simple but powerful strategy to not just learn new things, but to make that knowledge actually stick.
Okay, so let's just get right into it. This is the big question, right? We all want to learn useful stuff, get better at solving problems, and, not sound clueless in conversations. But how do you do that without getting lost in a bunch of vague, philosophical advice? Well, if you go looking for advice online, you're going to find a ton of so-called brain hacks. Eat blueberries, drink black coffee, sleep more. And look, none of this stuff is bad for you, but let's be real. At some point, you actually have to learn something. These are tiny tweaks. They're not a real strategy.
So, if the answer isn't in a cup of coffee or some fancy playlist, where is it? Well, the truth is, the real core of getting smarter is way, way more straightforward. It's all about one fundamental activity that just sets the stage for everything else. And here it is, step 1. The most important step on this whole path is just to read. That's it. It's the foundation that everything else gets built on.
Now, reading isn't just one thing. Fiction is awesome. It's great for boosting your reading speed, your vocabulary, but for what we're talking about today, gaining practical, useful knowledge, nonfiction is where it's at. That's how you learn new skills and find those amazing little facts you can actually use in a conversation.
Okay, and that brings us to a really crucial social skill. Because you've read something cool, you've learned something interesting, but how do you bring it up without being that, well, actually guy that everybody avoids at a party? The difference here is so subtle, but it's everything. The annoying way directly corrects somebody, which makes them feel dumb. The smart way, it invites them into a discovery with you. When you frame it as something you just learned yourself, you're sharing, not lecturing. And here's the real key. You seem smarter when you make other people feel smart too.
All right, so you're reading, you're learning new stuff. Awesome. But that's honestly only half the battle. Now we get to the tricky part. How do you make sure that knowledge actually stays in your brain and doesn't just disappear a day later? Well, the secret to learning efficiently is all about the 80-20 rule, and it starts by mastering just 20% of the really core fundamental knowledge of any subject. Just that initial super focused effort is what gives you a massive 80% of the results. But, and this is the part you cannot skip, the thing that makes this whole system work is practice. Your brain is basically designed to forget information it thinks is useless. Practice is how you send a giant signal to your brain that says, hey, this is important, keep it. So, what does this practice actually look like? Well, for a physical skill, it's pretty direct. Think about learning to tie a tie. You don't learn just by watching a video, right? No. You learn by watching the video while you have a tie in your hands, struggling along with it. You apply the knowledge the second you get it.
But what about something you can't just do right away, like, say, jump-starting a car? This is where this amazing technique comes in. Visualization. After you read the instructions, you mentally walk through the whole thing. You imagine yourself opening the hood, connecting the cables in the right order, hearing that engine finally turn over. You create a full-on mental rehearsal.
And here's the wild part, the reason this works so well. Neurologically, your brain has a really hard time telling the difference between a real physical memory and a super detailed, vividly imagined one. So by visualizing, you're basically tricking your brain into thinking it's already done this before, which makes the memory 10 times stronger.
So, let's recap. We've got our method, read to get the knowledge, then practice, either for real or through visualization, to make it stick. Now let's talk about the single most efficient tool ever invented for this exact process.
What format out there combines pure, dense information with a built-in way to practice? It's not some new app, it's not a YouTube channel, and it's probably something you haven't touched in a while. That's right, textbooks. I know, it sounds so old school, but if your goal is to get smart as fast as humanly possible, textbooks are, without a doubt, the S-tier, top-of-the-line format. And here's the simple reason why they're so powerful. A good textbook is all substance and no fluff. It gives you pure information, and then, this is the magic part, it gives you practice questions. It literally forces you to pull that information back out of your brain and use it, which is the very definition of making knowledge stick. Look, are textbooks fun? Not really. They're not as easy and passive as watching a video that you're going to forget 5 minutes later. But they work. They work because those questions at the end of the chapter create a perfect simulation.
They create a little imaginary scenario where the information is suddenly useful, training your brain to remember it for when a real-world situation actually happens.
So I'll just leave you with this one question to think about. If the stakes were high, if you absolutely had to master a new skill in the next 30 days, would you really just watch a few videos and hope something sticks? Or would you take the direct path, read it, practice it, and make that knowledge truly, permanently your own?